Another day, another insane hate crime accusation that has no basis in reality. Hey guys, welcome back to the show, your home for independent and nonpartisan commentary and analysis on politics, media, internet insanity, and more. We're going to talk about something really serious, but absolutely unhinged that's unfolding right now in the world of media and politics and internet slop. And this is concerning, of course, the death of Jason Arday, which has become a huge story. He was a Cambridge professor and highly celebrated academic who then faced widespread media scrutiny and fanfare after it was brought to light that he had extensively lied about his life, faked or altered data, and plagiarized extensively as well. Now, he then tragically last Friday died, and it does seem that his death was by suicide, which, whatever you think of the guy, all the many criticisms of his wrongdoing aside, is absolutely tragic. And my heart does go out to him and his family. And of course, I wish he was still here with us. However, some people are blaming the media for calling out and spotlighting his many misdeeds and the various institutions that coddled and protected him for years for his death, rather than the tragedy of the situation and the fact that he built his entire life on a house of cards that came crumbling down. Chief among those is the anti-racist academic and activist Ibram X. Kendi, author of the infamous best-selling book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Anyway, he wrote on X and in an article, quote, "The death of Jason Arday hit so close to home that I had no words yesterday, but I woke up with words." We'll just pause on that. If somebody who's a serial fabulist and lied about so many things that you can't even list them in 1,000-word article, if him, any sort of controversy involving him really hits home for you, like, wait, that's weird. You understand that's sus in and of itself. Anyway, back to his tweet here. "To be a prominent anti-racist black scholar is to know you are a target, almost totally surrounded by resentments. You know that at any point the attacks can come like a lynch mob. And if you die from all the attacks, the media still calls the attacks on you accusations to wash their hands of the blood. Your lynchers announce your death as if they had no role in your lynching." He attached an article he wrote titled, "The Media Lynched Jason Arday." Now, this is an extremely serious accusation, bizarrely coming from somebody who has worked in the world of journalism at times in his career. But yes, he is actually comparing someone tragically taking their own life, based on what we know now about the death, though that isn't confirmed, after extensive media furor and scrutiny of a lifetime of lies, of really elaborate and bizarre lies, as we're going to get into, somebody in elite institutions who was heralded by outlets like the BBC and given softballs and advised the British government on education curriculum and had an elite post at a top university that was explicitly given to him as part of a DEI-style focus on uplifting black professors and academics. Obviously, when the kind of allegations that were made against him and just the actual things that were proven to be false that he had claimed, when those all come out, it's going to be a massive scandal and there's going to be a lot of tabloid stories about it. But in what universe is that a lynching? And how is that not an absolutely insane thing to say? Well, the community note appended to Ibram X. Kendi's tweet says, "To lynch means when an angry crowd or mob kills a person without a legal trial or lawful justice, usually by hanging them from a rope. The tragic death of Jason Arday has been reported as a suicide following his resignation over allegations of plagiarism and data fraud." Then they link to the obituary for him. Now, I actually took the time to read Ibram X. Kendi's article to see what kind of argument he's making here. And the most bizarre thing about it is that it doesn't mention really almost any of the extensively documented fabulism and lies that Jason Arday told about his life that sounds too good to be true or too crazy to be real, because it was. And so he just glosses all over these things, acts as if, in his telling, right, Jason Arday, it was all just a witch hunt over debunked plagiarism allegations, specifically meant to hound an example of black excellence or something. And that just bears like literally no resemblance to reality. So I want to read from Spiked Online from Fraser Myers. He went through some of the fabrications this man made, telling his life story. If you or your child spent years growing up on social media and experienced serious mental health issues, you should hear this. Recently, a jury ordered Meta and YouTube to pay millions for their role in designing and promoting addictive platforms. They knew their apps could contribute to anxiety, depression, and body image issues, but did not share those risks while prioritizing profits. The recent historic verdict underscores the consequences of those decisions. Now, Morgan & Morgan is stepping up to hold these platforms accountable for the harm they caused. Click the link in my bio to take a short quiz, as you may be entitled to a potential recovery of over $1,000. Now back to the show. Anyway, quote, "He did not merely claim to have had a challenging life. He claimed at times to have survived and recovered from nonverbal autism, locked-in syndrome, 2 brain tumors, and testicular cancer. He claimed not only to have been athletic, but also to have played football for Crystal Palace, he means soccer, played semi-professional snooker, and run 30 marathons in 35 days, 9 on a broken leg. He said he was on the TV show 7 Up, even though it aired several decades before he was born. To dismiss this all as a non-story, or merely about plagiarism or a few minor academic errors, as his defenders now do, is to ignore what made the scandal so compelling." He adds, "Not only was the Arday affair merely ginned up by the right, one of the most damning exposés came from The Guardian. Indeed, it was Black Guardian journalist Lanre Bakare who exposed Arday's lurid false claim that he had been sent a severed pig's head in the post. The New York Times found evidence that Arday's claim to have grown up as nonverbal was false, witheringly concluding that his remarkable trajectory had no precedent in medical literature." So this dude, this professor, who did tragically take his own life, he claimed all sorts of outlandish and implausible things about his life story, to have recovered from practically every disease under the sun, to have committed athletic feats that would make him one of the most significant athletes in the world. And then all of this is starting to get debunked and fall apart. And obviously people did not ask nearly enough questions when they were hiring him and giving him, for example, a book contract for over $1 million and doing these glowing profiles of him as the youngest black professor and in the BBC and all these things. Clearly, they were just accepting a lot at face value that didn't happen and a lot of obviously falsehoods. And the dude appears to have been just a serial liar. Now, look, that doesn't make his death anything but a tragedy. That doesn't mean that his life didn't have value. Of course it did. He was a human. He had family. He had loved ones. And I'm sure there were things about him that were positive. But the media calling him out for all of this, even in sensationalist or overblown fashion, isn't the same as lynching someone. How do I have to explain that? How is that even a question? What? Like, I'm almost taken aback that ostensibly serious and ostensibly anti-racist intellectuals would make such a claim. Are you high? Anyway, I want to go through some of the points, if we're being generous, and we're going to call them that Kendi makes in his article, where he actually accuses the media of lynching Jason Arday. He writes, "The white-owned mainstream media circulates their attacks and piles on and on and on. The white-owned mainstream media published 249 articles in 22 days on Jason Arday, according to data from News Corp, a UK media watchdog." Now, obviously, that's a lot of articles, but really, when you think about it, there's like 50 different publications in the UK, and all of them do a couple articles over the course of a few weeks. That adds up rather fast. And when you think about the sensational details of this story, because of the lies that Jason Arday himself told, like his Herculean athletic feats that have been debunked, like the false claims about all these medical issues that he claims to have overcome. And then when you think about the elite and world-famous institutions that are implicated in these scandals, like Cambridge, like the BBC, and so on, it's not that crazy, actually, that you would have that number of articles. And the comparisons here that Kendi tries to make, even at face value, still wouldn't be a lynching, right? The words still have meaning, and words or even unfair media coverage is still not violence, right? It's not an act of literally killing someone. But even at face value, that doesn't add up. But then also, these aren't really great comparisons. So Kendi writes, by comparison, in 2024, in the weeks after the then newly released Epstein files showed long-standing ties between Epstein and Peter Mandelson, former UK ambassador to the US, the UK media mentioned Mandelson 119 times, News Corp found. So what he's saying is that there was this significant story about the Epstein files and about the former UK ambassador to the US, and that it didn't get as many media mentions as this story. That's because this is more sensational than that, right? That is a serious story, but it just doesn't have the same degree of absurdity that this story does. And so you could say that maybe in a more serious world, one would be covered more than the other, but it's like, I'm not sure what point that's supposed to prove, really. You could probably find like silly celebrity stories. I'm sure you could find Harry and Meghan, some controversy about them, getting 300 articles, and it's more than this Epstein files story. That's just because, unfortunately, like, the public is interested in stories that are not always, in fact, the most serious and somber things happening in a country. Sure. Okay. And now how do we get to they lynched him by reporting truthfully about his lies and plagiarism accusations? What? That's the crazy part here. And Kendi just does not get it, or he's being willfully obtuse, because he writes also in this article, quote, in 2023, only the Financial Times covered extensively that William O'Reilly, a white Cambridge professor, was found guilty of plagiarism. All told, a black Cambridge professor endured substantially more media coverage for an accusation of plagiarism by a known racist propagandist than a white Cambridge professor found guilty of plagiarism. This totally misses the point, as if the Jason Arday story is just about plagiarism. The dude lied about his entire life, including the most outlandish and sordid details and these extreme, like, medical issues and all these things he's overcome, about millions of dollars he supposedly fundraised. So it's like, yeah, okay, if a plagiarism story didn't get very much attention, but then this other story did, and the only difference is because he's black. There are many, many, many more differences here than just the white versus black of the professor, and that is being so intentionally obtuse. Also, he's just like acting as if there's just one plagiarism accusation against Jason Arday. They're actually extensive, and then part of the story is that some of the institutions declared him to have done nothing wrong, right? They're covering their own ass. But then when anybody objectively looks at it, it's extensively clear he ripped other people's work off without proper citations. And he was, obviously, there's another angle to it, that he was explicitly hired and promoted as part of an emphasis on diversity, even though, like, the New York Times acknowledged that his resume was pretty weak for the position when he was first hired, relative to what a typical qualification would be. So there's many reasons here for why this story got outsized coverage compared to other stories. And even if you think those are all bad reasons or wrong, it's still not lynching somebody. Like, this is crazy. And it wasn't just Ibram X. Kendi who said this. Black Lives Matter UK came out with an official statement saying that Jason Arday was lynched. And you'll find this commentary in this genre of rhetoric all over social media. And I just find it absolutely insane for a couple reasons. First and foremost, a self-inflicted death can never be a lynching. Like, definitionally, it is not. First and foremost, that creates this, like, sinister, narcissistic heckler's veto of criticism, where you can ascribe to someone violence or manipulate people by threatening to harm yourself if they say truthful things about you in public, or even untruthful things about you in public. Though in this case, most of the media coverage, even if it was sensationalist, was highlighting real lies and serious allegations of wrongdoing. You can never weaponize your mental health. Well, of course, I want people to get help. I don't want anyone to do such tragic and horrible things. You can never weaponize this. We can never allow you to weaponize that as a tool to silence criticism of people in positions of power at elite institutions, especially when their story does obviously tie in to much bigger political and societal-wide themes. This also it's very interesting because these people think they are being champions of Black people or what have you with this absurdist rhetoric, but they're actually stripping him of his individual agency as an actual person who makes choices. And they're suggesting that this was done to him and something that happened totally out of his hands and out of his control. It was imposed on him and done to him by the media mob or something like that. That's literally and figuratively not true. So I just find it incredibly, incredibly ironic that in the name of, I don't know, supporting Black people, anti-racism or diversity or whatever, they are actively removing the agency and responsibility of a Black person. And then I always find it so deeply sinister when people start conflating words with violence, right? Because even if the media coverage of this man was horrifically unfair and disproportionate, which I don't believe, to be clear, I think that's totally wrong. But even if it was, it's still not killing someone. It's still not the same as an act of violence. There's words, and then there's violence. And this isn't a Venn diagram. This is two circles. And as soon as you allow the conflation of those two things, well, then the entire basis for civil society and discourse collapses. Because if words can be violence, then if you are being violent to me with your words, I could be violent to you towards you with actual violence in self-defense, quote unquote. I could even be justified in preemptive violence to protect myself from the violence of your words. And before you know it, you can't have a democratic or liberal society in any way when you're down that path. You end up in might makes right, kind of civil war, actually killing each other and hurting each other because of things people are saying, or having a state come in and do it, a government of some kind. It's like this is the road to dystopia. And they are affirmatively embracing and promoting it and calling themselves progressives. I also have to say, and obviously this is not like my personal like history or trauma or anything, but it sure seems very deeply disrespectful to the actual horrors of African American history and the terrible things that were done to Black people, people that were dragged to trees and lynched, to compare a mass media campaign against somebody who'd done a lot wrong and lied about a lot of things that maybe went overboard, and then he chose to end his own life. To compare those things seems actually like really incredibly, profoundly insulting to the victims of actual lynching. But what do I know? Anyway, guys, I just can't believe that this is a real discourse we actually have to have. I'll cover more of the fallout from the Jason Arday affair later, I think, because there's even more we haven't gotten into here. But this story is crazy. It is going mega viral. Everyone's talking about it. But I really do think we're witnessing some form of mass psychosis among some of the discourse that people are having about it. That's just my take. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Do hit the like button, and we'll be back with more real soon.